Greetings, it is I, Tristan, and I wanted to make a very nerdy video because I don't know if I've talked about this much with other people besides my close friends, my family, my cat, but within the last 2 years, I have become extremely captivated and infatuated and obsessed with trading card games, particularly Magic the Gathering, and also as of this last month, Yu-Gi-Oh! I've been getting back into it. And really it's all just because in the current work that I'm making right now, so the paintings I'm doing, I'm really trying to return to things I thought about when I was a kid in my hometown and in my childhood house that I grew up in. Given that my family recently sold my childhood house and we've all moved to different places, and that's a whole nother story for another time. But anyway, I have also found that it's been a fantastic escape from everything, from my own paintings, having another sort of passion project that's not my artwork is so relieving on the soul, and it makes me feel so rejuvenated. And recently there's been a very infamous banning of some cards in the Magic the Gathering universe, particularly in the Commander format, and members of the committee that were responsible for said bans, they've been getting death threats over this. I want people to understand that there are poor individuals that are legitimately getting death threats over cardboard cards and the fact that we can't play some of them anymore. And also recently, through some awesome content creators, I've been just observing and listening to really sad stories of how toxic some players of both Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be. And as someone that is a little introverted and has never truly been able to play like in tournaments or go out and play at local game stores, I find that so disheartening that there are just people trying to ruin these awesome games. And I just thought it'd be fun to make a quick little video kind of going over the differences between the two games, because they have some similarities surprisingly, but also they have definite differences that I think are really fascinating and make me want to keep returning to both of the games. And as a quick little side cap here, you know, when I was younger, like, gosh, I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic. It had to have been, I believe the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime had come out in 2001, possibly 1999. I might be getting those dates mixed up, or I might be thinking of the Japanese release versus the release in the United States. But anyway, I got into it when I was really young, like first grade. It was awesome. I wanted everything to do with it. And then I also had seen Magic the Gathering cards at the Walmart and Target when I was a kid, and I became really obsessed with it. I was intrigued by the artwork, and as someone that has always loved to draw and paint and is still doing it today, it was hook, line, and sinker from there on. And I was collecting cards, and I honestly quit getting cards, quit buying cards when I was in high school, I believe, because I had moved on to other hobbies such as playing guitar and music, and that took over my life, as it easily does. And time moved on, and I eventually went to grad school. I got my degree in painting and drawing, and it was actually the year after I graduated, 2022, so yeah, 2 years ago now, Magic the Gathering partnered up with Lord of the Rings and created the Universes Beyond series, which showcases different trademarked or licensed shows, movies, and things of that nature. And Lord of the Rings was the current one, and I believe it has been one of the most popular, if not the most popular series that they've had in a long while. But since I got into it, I just was thinking, okay, I'm going to get one of the pre-constructed commander decks, and that's it. It's going to be nothing more than that. But
here I am. I've gotten many more cards. I don't want to talk about how much, but I've bought responsibly. I can still pay bills, and it hasn't completely destroyed um, my bank account.
But yeah, I want to talk about the different rules and how the games differ and how they're similar. So let's get started on that. To begin this analysis of both games, we're going to look at both playmats first. Now, with Magic the Gathering, a lot of times you do not see designated zones on the playmats. Usually they may look like this. I have this lovely playmat that my sister got me. It's of Urza, one of my favorite Magic characters. And the most important zones to know are the graveyard, exile, commander, and just the field in general. Now, we have this one awesome card over here. This is one of my most recent favorite commander cards. Her name's Mabel, and she's this awesome mouse character. She's a mom, she's a warrior. Anyway, not about Mabel. It's just the fact that if you play the format commander, you usually will see every player's commander in one of the corners of the playmat. And it's kind of chaotic at times. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes when you play Magic, other players can attest to this. You can have some chaotic results with how the field looks after the game goes on for a while. And here we have the playfield or the mat of Yu-Gi-Oh! And as you can see, there are zones for particular cards. You can see there's two zones where my lilac card sleeves are covering. The zone on the left is going to be called the extra deck, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the zone that has my lilac covered cards on the right is the deck. And this is where just your regular minimum 40 card deck lays during the game. Now, the big difference with Magic, as you saw in the last slide there, is the fact that you can only have up to 5 spell and trap cards on the field, and you can only have up to 5 monster cards on the field. And now, in more recent iterations of the game, there is this zone called the Extra Monster Zone. Now, I'm not going to get super into all the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! In this little nerdy video, but and sometime I might get a little bit more nerdier with it. I've been really enjoying going back and relearning and actually learning because I actually didn't know how to play the most recent version of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's very interactive, I must say. It's really cool. And with the restriction of the playfield in the Yu-Gi-Oh! I find that the games do tend to be quicker than that of Magic the Gathering. And I actually want to talk about what lives inside the extra deck. Most of the time, it's going to be particular type of monster cards. Or I should say, to be grammatically correct, particular types of monster cards. So, as you can see, if you're somebody that grew up with the original Yu-Gi-Oh!, you may not recognize the white, black, or blue monster cards, and that's because they're more recent types of monster cards in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, and they're incredibly cool. I must say, the purple monster card that's shouldn't be too surprising to some of you. This is a regular fusion monster, so in order to play these cards, most of the time you need another spell card called Polymerization and the 2 ingredients that make up the monster in order to play it. Now, the white card is known as a Synchro monster. These are essentially a free polymerization fusion monster. However, the levels or the stars on the Synchro monster has to add up to the correct number with the 2 monsters that you use. So, let's say you have like a Synchro monster that's like a rank 10 or a level 10. The 2 monsters that you use to synchro summon it have to add up to 10. So you can have like a 3 and a 7 or a 5 and a 5, etc. Now, the black card is known as an XZ, or it's XYZ. The fan base of Yu-Gi-Oh! Refers to them as XZs. And these are another type of free kind of fusion monster card where it has a very specific request of the monsters that you fuse together. However, the difference between this, and in my opinion, I think XZs are a little bit more interesting and fun to play with compared to Synchros, because with the XZs, most of the time, let's say you have a rank or level 4 XZs, you have to have at least two monsters that are also both level 4, and you stack them. You literally stack the cards on top of each other with the XZ's monster you want to summon on top of the other two that you're attributing. And a lot of Xyz monsters have a really cool ability where you can detach the materials, and you get an effect when you detach fusion monsters from the Xyz, and you discard it into your graveyard. And you can keep adding materials that are good and meet the requirements of the Xyz monster as you keep playing. Now, finally, we have probably the most recent type of monster in Yu-Gi-Oh, which is called the Link Monster. This is the blue one, and I think the Link Monsters are my current favorite, actually, because they get to use the extra monster zone that we see. And they also have a really interesting feature where they have these little tiny red arrows all around their window, the art window, if you will. And these arrows, depending on what the cards do, the Link Monsters, if the Link Monster's arrow is pointing at another monster, that monster can either help the Link Monster in like getting extra attack or pulling off an ability or an effect, or the Link Monster helps that monster that it's pointing to. And with Link Monsters, what's cool is it's a different type of tribute summoning, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But essentially, when you can summon other Link Monsters, but you can only summon them to the arrows that the first Link Monster you summoned are pointing to. Really interesting. Again, I think it's just a very interactive way of playing and keeps things interesting throughout the game. And now we're going to move on to what a first turn looks like in both games. Alright, so we're going to look at what a first turn looks like for Magic the Gathering. And I'm going to be focusing on the Commander format because honestly, this is the format that keeps me coming to the game and makes me want to keep playing it and introducing other people to it. So you start off with 40 life points. Now, if you're playing standard, it's 20 life points. So math is easy to do in your head. You don't need to necessarily use a phone or some kind of life tracker app, even though they're very handy. And in Magic the Gathering, if you're going first, both you and your opponent draw 7 cards. Now, you do not draw another card. With your first turn, you have to utilize the cards that you have in your hand. Now, if you don't like the hand that you have, you can do what's called a mulligan, which is you put these 7 cards back into your deck and you give it a shuffle, and then instead of drawing 7, you draw 6 cards. But in this case, just for the sake of this example, I'm just going to keep this hand, and every time you get a land in your hand, which is going to be the very card on the very most right hand side of this hand. This is a basic land called the Mountains. The other card adjacent to it on the left of it, this is not a basic land. This is a land that has a different ability rather than giving you mana. Because the whole point of Magic the Gathering is that your basic lands, or all your lands essentially, you get to pay mana in order to pay to cast creatures or spells, and these are things you play with in the game in order to get your opponent's life total from 20 or 40 to 0. And Commander, there's a couple other things too. There's something called Commander damage. And if you're Commander, so remember how I brought up Mabel earlier? If my little mouse mom warrior were to do 20 points of damage in Commander, I would win the game. Even if it's not all 40 life points of my opponent, it only takes 20 to win the game. And also there's something called toxic counters. Some creatures and some spells put toxic counters on your opponents, and if you get 10 toxic counters, you lose the game. So, for my first move with my opening hand, what I'm going to do is, since I have that basic land, I'm going to go ahead and play it. And when you play a basic land, what's nice about it, since it only gives you 1 mana of the designated color, in this case I have a red mana, or fire mana, mountain mana, whatever you want to call it, you can actually tap it, and you can pay for something. So, I have this awesome enchantment class card, and it is one red mana in order to cast it. So I'm going to go ahead and use that mountain to pay for that to come out onto the field. And it's a 3 level card, so if I pay additional mana for level 2 and level 3, I get some really juicy abilities. This is probably one of my favorite cards currently from the Bloomborough series. And basically, I get to make a sword, and then when I pay for the second level, I get to attach it if my creatures do combat with my opponent, and I can attach it without paying the equip cost. And it's just a fantastic card. It's a great way, even if though I don't have any creatures on the board right now, I'm prepping for something good. Now, in true fashion, we're going to take a look at the first turn playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, a little bit different here. With Yu-Gi-Oh!, when you're the first player going, you and your opponent both draw 5 cards, and you do not draw a card on your first turn. So, with this hand here, this is a pretty good hand. I got some really good lower level monsters. I got a couple traps and a spell. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting with Yu-Gi-Oh! Compared to Magic. There is no type of currency. Now, there is something, though, that I think is important to address and maybe make a term for. I think it already exists, but there is a different type of currency with Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is, you can only play one monster per turn, or what they call normal summoning. So, you can only normal summon monsters that are level 4 or lower, or if there's another type of card that has a particular stipulation and you can normal summon, then you can. But level 4 or lower monsters, you can play for free. You can either put them face up attack position, which is how this I'm going to show you what that looks like with my cool frog guy here. Or you can have it in face down defense position, which is basically turning it 90 degrees and having it be horizontal or landscape. Now, the thing too with Yu-Gi-Oh! That's really interesting is your spell and trap cards, they can do some pretty powerful things. And you have 5 zones, so you can have up to 5, technically 6, if you want to include the field spell zone. But with this hand here, if you really wanted to, you could play 2 traps and 1 spell your first turn. That's perfectly legal. There's nothing wrong with it. But you can only have 1 monster at a time. So out of the 2 monsters in my hand that I drew here, I want to play my frog monster. And that's because this little frog monster has a really neat ability where if my opponent were to attack it, I can negate any damage, and I can summon any type of cyber monster from this deck that I have here. And it doesn't have to be, it could be a level 8. It doesn't have to be just a level 4 or lower. Now, with tributing summoning, I mentioned this earlier briefly, but if you have level 5 to 6 monsters, you have to tribute or sacrifice 1 monster. And if you have anything that's level 7 and above, you have to sacrifice at least 2 monsters. And most of the time, they have to be monsters that are already on the battlefield. So they need to exist already. They cannot be ones from your hand unless you have a spell or an effect from a monster that says otherwise. And I forgot to mention this too at the beginning, but the life point total for Yu-Gi-Oh! Is 8,000. Yes, I need to say that one more time. Your life point total for Yu-Gi-Oh! Is 8,000. So the mental math is a little bit more tricky, and there are some really nice apps. I mentioned Life Point Tracker apps that exist, and they are very handy when playing this game. Because, especially after you get off work, the last thing you want to do is have to do any math that involves 4 digits. It's easy. You can do it. I do it, but it's nice not to have to think too much and just enjoy the game. Expand upon the field I had set up on the Magic the Gathering example and show you what it could look like as the game progresses. And as you can see, with only having 3 mana, I think this was technically like the 5th or 6th turn that I got the board to this state. It might have been 7th. I lost track, but for this example, it doesn't really matter. The point that I want to make with the mana currency of Magic, though, is the fact that if you have 7, 8 lands, you can generate quite a bit of mana, and there are artifacts you can play too that also generate mana. So if you have a lot of things that generate mana in Magic the Gathering, you can make a ridiculous, horrifying board state for you and your opponents, and it's a lot of fun. Honestly, um, I really enjoy Magic the Gathering. I love Yu-Gi-Oh too, though. I really like the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh kind of is made to be a quick game. Like they can go super fast, but with Magic, it really becomes a social game because even though the life points are less than Yu-Gi-Oh, you still have so many hoops to jump through in order to actually attack your opponent sometimes. And also, with Magic the Gathering, the reason why I'm a big fan of the Commander format is the fact that there is the one big rule, which is you can only have one type of the same card. You can't have multiples. In Magic the Gathering Standard and also Yu-Gi-Oh, you can have Yu-Gi-Oh, you can have three of the same card, and in Magic the Gathering, the standard format, you can have up to four copies of the same card. And I find that sometimes it makes games a little stale when you're just playing with the same card in the deck that you have. And so I think it makes things really spicy when you have a deck of 100 cards, and the only copy of the card that you have are your land cards. And it just makes things more unpredictable, makes things so much more fun. And also, I don't know if I'm going to get into it today, but I just want to say I think both card games have really good value products. Now, obviously, it's not cheap, it's expensive. But I will say, to get into the Commander format, the Commander pre-constructed decks for Magic the Gathering are an absolute deal. They are amazing. You get some really good reprints of some classic cards, and of course you get cards of whatever current series that has Commander decks. And with Yu-Gi-Oh, if you want to get started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, you can get structure decks for literally starting at like $11.99, $13.99. They are very modestly priced for 40 cards, and they have cards that are very recent and relevant to the game, and you just can't beat that. It's really a good deal, and especially if you want to learn the game, they come with these really handy and instruction manuals on how the rules are conducted, and they just have good cards in them too. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of point out why I have fallen down this rabbit hole as deep as I have. If you've made it this far, you're a nerd just like me, and you should be proud of it because being a nerd is just alright. Well, anyway, I gotta go play some games now. Card games, as you can see, as you can tell. But I'll see you around. I'll have more paintings posted, obviously, and we'll see if I do more content like this. I don't know if this was at all interesting, but for anyone that's a toxic player in the game, either game, shame on you. You should be enthusiastic about this game. You should be wanting more people to play this game because these games are incredible and they're so fun. And I just think the communities both deserve better. And also for anyone that works at Konami or Wizards of the Coast, none of them deserve any sort of threats or death threats over a game. This is just a game. These games are all about chance as well. You could have the best deck ever, in the entire world, but once you shuffle it and once you deal with the hand that you're given, you gotta make the best of it. Maybe it's just a generational thing. I don't know what it is, but I was raised to deal with the hand that you got and make the best of what you get. And that's why I love these games, because you just never know what's going to happen. You just have to roll with it and enjoy it. And gosh, it's just a beautiful thing. But have a great day.